"Hands off that car," Victoria Langford snapped, her voice cutting through the front drive of the Langford Grand Hotel like a crack of ice against crystal. Marcus Bennett stopped with one hand on the door handle of the black Rolls-Royce Phantom, the key fob still warm in his palm, the tiny silver emblem glowing beneath the canopy lights. For 1 second, no one moved. The valet froze beside a row of luxury cars. A bellman holding 2 leather suitcases looked over his shoulder. A couple in evening clothes slowed near the revolving doors, their smiles fading as they realized something ugly had just stepped into the polished air. Victoria came down the marble steps in a white designer coat, diamonds flashing at her throat, her heels clicking hard enough to make people turn before she even spoke again. "That man is trying to steal a Rolls-Royce." Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not pull away. He simply looked at her, then at the 2 security guards who had already begun moving toward him, as if her accusation had weight before it had proof. Rain misted sideways through the yellow light above the entrance, settling on the hood of the car in 1,000 tiny beads. The Rolls-Royce reflected everything around it. The hotel columns, the red taillights, Victoria's pale face, Marcus's dark coat, and the sudden circle of people who had decided, without being asked, that this was their entertainment for the night. "Ma'am," Marcus said evenly, "this is my vehicle." Victoria let out a short laugh, not loud, but sharp enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Of course it is." The way she said it made the words smaller than an insult and colder than a joke. She looked him over from his worn brown shoes to the plain charcoal jacket he had thrown on that morning before visiting the hospital. No watch with a glittering face. No driver waiting nearby. No expensive scarf. No loud proof of wealth. No bodyguard stepping forward to announce him. To Victoria, that was all the evidence she needed. "Security," she said, lifting one manicured hand. "Do not let him leave." Marcus felt the night tighten around him. He had been inside the hotel less than 20 minutes, long enough to step out of a private elevator, avoid 3 executives waiting to shake his hand, and walk quietly toward the car he had purchased 2 weeks earlier because his mother Evelyn had once told him, during a long bus ride across Georgia, that a Rolls-Royce looked like a machine made for men who never had to run from anything. He had bought it after her surgery was scheduled, not because he needed it, but because sometimes survival leaves a person wanting one beautiful thing that says the hard years did not win. Now he stood beside that beautiful thing while strangers studied him like a problem. One of the guards, a broad man with a hotel earpiece, held up both palms. "Sir, step away from the vehicle for a moment." "I can show registration," Marcus said. "I can show the key. I can call the dealership." Victoria stepped closer, her perfume cutting through the damp smell of pavement and warm engine metal. "People can steal keys. People can fake paperwork. I saw you lingering near this car earlier." Marcus turned his head slightly. "I walked past it because it was parked here." "Because you were watching it," she said. Her certainty grew with the attention. That was the dangerous thing about a crowd. It could feed a lie until the lie stood upright. Someone near the valet stand lifted a phone. Then another. A little red recording light blinked in the corner of Marcus's eye. The hotel doors spun behind Victoria, releasing warm air, soft piano music, and the faint scent of flowers from the lobby. Inside, the Langford Grand was all gold trim, polished stone, and quiet money. Outside, beneath the canopy, Marcus was being turned into a scene. The first police cruiser arrived without sirens, its blue lights sliding silently across the wet pavement and over the Rolls-Royce's black paint. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped out, followed by Officer Maria Collins, both scanning the faces before settling on Marcus because everyone else was already looking at him. Victoria moved first, as if she owned the truth by arriving at it loudly. "Officer, thank God. This man was attempting to take this Rolls-Royce. I caught him before he could drive away." Marcus kept his hands visible, the key fob resting open in his right palm. "Officer, the car belongs to me." Hayes glanced at the key, then at the car, then at Victoria, whose posture had the confidence of a woman used to being believed before being questioned. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to remain calm and not enter the vehicle until we sort this out." "I am calm," Marcus said. And he was, at least on the outside. But beneath his ribs, something old had begun to ache. Not fear exactly. Something more tired than fear. The exhaustion of being asked, again and again, to prove he belonged in places other people entered without thought. Victoria crossed her arms. He was about to open the door. "Because it's my door," Marcus replied softly. A few people shifted. The line was simple, almost too simple, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed through the valet's face. But Victoria did not see it. Or she refused to. "People should learn where they belong," she said under her breath, but not quietly enough. The words landed on the hood between them, heavier than the rain. Marcus looked at her then, truly looked at her, and something in his expression changed. Not anger, not humiliation, a stillness. Officer Collins noticed it. So did the guard closest to him. Marcus slowly placed the key fob on the roof of the Rolls-Royce, beside a silver trail of rainwater. "Then let's learn," he said. "Run the plates. Check the hotel cameras. And after that, ask Ethan Langford why his wife is accusing the man he was waiting upstairs to impress." Officer Hayes followed the direction of Marcus's eyes toward the hotel entrance, where warm lobby light spilled across the wet stone like honey poured over glass. The name Ethan Langford had changed the air by a few degrees. It did not make the officers step back. It did not make Victoria lower her chin. But it introduced a thin crack in the certainty around her, and Marcus saw it travel from face to face. The valet looked toward the revolving doors. One security guard touched his earpiece. Officer Collins glanced at the key fob resting on the roof of the Rolls-Royce, then back at Marcus's calm hands. Marcus had learned long ago that calm was not the same as weakness. Calm was a lock on a door that rage kept trying to open. His grandmother used to tell him that when he was a boy in a small rented house outside Savannah, where the summer heat made the walls breathe and the old refrigerator rattled all night like loose coins in a coffee can. Back then, Marcus owned 2 church shirts, 1 pair of school shoes, and a shoebox full of paper scraps covered in numbers. He had loved numbers because numbers did not laugh when you entered a room. Numbers did not judge a name, a jacket, or a face. They told the truth if you had the patience to listen. He was 12 when Evelyn Bennett found him sitting behind the public library after closing, copying business terms from an old finance magazine because he could not afford to take it home. She was a retired school secretary with silver hair, a strict voice, and the softest hands he had ever known. She did not ask why he was outside alone. She simply sat beside him on the curb and said, "If you are going to study money, baby, first learn what it cannot buy." Years later, when she became his legal guardian, she gave him her last name without ceremony, as if belonging was not a favor but a fact. Marcus carried that lesson into every room he entered. He carried it into his first scholarship interview, where a trustee mispronounced his name 3 times. He carried it into the investment firm where men with easier childhoods explained markets to him, as if he had not already memorized the architecture beneath their confidence. He carried it when he founded Bennett Holdings from a borrowed desk in Atlanta, turning failing regional businesses into stable companies by doing one thing most powerful people forgot to do. He listened. He listened to mechanics before executives, nurses before hospital boards, front desk clerks before hotel owners. That was why he had come to the Langford Grand without an entourage, without a press release, without the navy suit his assistants had laid out for him. He wanted to see the hotel before it knew it was being watched. He wanted to know whether the marble smiled only at people who looked expensive. Earlier that afternoon, he had walked through the lobby unnoticed. A housekeeper had nodded politely. A young bellman had held the door for an elderly couple while a manager scolded him for leaving his post. At the front desk, Marcus had heard a guest complain about a room and watched the receptionist apologize with the weary grace of someone paid to absorb storms. He had taken notes in his head. The building was beautiful. The culture was not. Then his phone had buzzed with a message from the hospital. Evelyn was awake. She wanted to know whether he had eaten. He had smiled at that, standing beneath a chandelier worth more than the house she had raised him in. 15 minutes later, he had left the private meeting upstairs and headed for the front drive, planning to drive the 38 miles back to the medical center before visiting hours ended. The Rolls-Royce was not waiting there as a trophy. It was waiting there because Evelyn had laughed when he showed it to her for the first time and said, "That car looks too quiet for all the noise it took to get here." Now the quiet car sat beneath flashing blue lights, and the woman accusing him had no idea that the man she was humiliating had spent the morning deciding whether her husband would remain employed. Victoria shifted impatiently, mist gathering on the shoulders of her white coat. She looked at Officer Hayes as if he were moving too slowly for her taste. "Please do your job," she said. "People like this count on hesitation." Officer Collins looked at her. "People like what, ma'am?" The question was gentle, but it landed cleanly. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it, suddenly aware of the phone's recording. Marcus did not rescue her from the silence. He had been asked all his life to make other people comfortable after they wounded him with assumptions. Not tonight. The security guard closest to the entrance spoke into his earpiece, then stiffened. His eyes moved from Marcus to Victoria, then to the black car. "Mr. Langford is on his way down," he said. Officer Hayes turned to Marcus. "Sir, until he arrives, I need you to stand right here." Marcus nodded once. "I will." His voice remained steady, but inside, he saw Evelyn's face in the hospital bed, the clear tube near her hand, the television playing old game shows she only half watched. He thought of the soup he had promised to bring her. He thought of the way she always hated lateness, even from doctors. Rain slid down his temple and disappeared beneath his collar. Across from him, Victoria stared as if his patience offended her more than any protest could have. The revolving doors began to turn. A tall man in a dark suit stepped into the night, moving fast, his expression already drained of color. Behind him came two executives, a hotel manager, and a woman from the legal team clutching a folder against her chest. Ethan Langford did not look at his wife first. He looked at Marcus. Then he stopped so suddenly that the people behind him nearly collided with his back. For one breath, the whole entrance held still. The rain, the lights, the phones, the officers, the car. Ethan swallowed hard and said, "Mr. Bennett, what happened here?" Ethan Langford's voice did what police lights had not done. It made Victoria turn pale beneath the soft gold glow of the hotel canopy. For the first time since she had stepped onto the wet front drive, her confidence lost its clean edges. She looked from her husband to Marcus, then to the Rolls-Royce, then back again, trying to rearrange the facts into something that still placed her above him. That was how Victoria had survived every uncomfortable truth in her life. She moved it, polished it, renamed it, and set it somewhere beneath her. The guests under the awning watched quietly now. The phones were still raised, but the mood had changed. A few minutes earlier, they had been recording a possible crime. Now they were recording a mistake that had grown too large to hide. Ethan stepped forward carefully, rain darkening the shoulders of his expensive suit. He was the kind of man who always looked prepared in boardrooms, on magazine covers, and at charity dinners where people laughed before the jokes were finished. But standing in front of Marcus Bennett, beside his wife, with two officers and half the hotel entrance watching, his preparation collapsed into silence. Victoria touched his sleeve. "Ethan," she said, her tone sharp with warning. "This man was opening a car that did not belong to him. I called the police because no one else was doing anything." Ethan did not answer her. His eyes stayed on Marcus. The woman from legal, Claire Whitman, came through the revolving doors behind him with a folder pressed to her chest. Her hair had come loose from its neat clip, and her breath showed in small white clouds as she hurried across the stone. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I am so sorry. The ownership documents are here, along with the purchase confirmation from Westlake Motor Cars." Officer Collins looked toward Officer Hayes. Hayes reached for the folder, but Claire held it out to Marcus first, as if even the order of respect mattered now. Marcus did not take it right away. He looked at Victoria instead. Rain touched the side of her face, but she did not wipe it away. She was too busy calculating. Victoria Langford had built her life on surfaces that never cracked in public. She had grown up in a lakefront house outside Chicago where the lawns were measured, the windows were washed twice a week, and apologies were something staff gave, not family. Her father had owned construction companies. Her mother had chaired museum boards. Victoria learned early that money did not merely buy things. It trained people to step aside before you arrived. At 24, she married Ethan when he was still rising, a polished hotel executive with bright ambition and a talent for making older men feel understood. By 38, she had become the unofficial queen of Langford society. She hosted fundraisers beneath crystal chandeliers, corrected waiters without lowering her smile, and described herself in interviews as a protector of standards. Standards became her favorite word. It sounded cleaner than fear. It sounded kinder than suspicion. It allowed her to look at a housekeeper, a driver, a clerk, or a stranger near an expensive car and decide they were out of place without ever saying what she truly meant. That night, in front of the Langford Grand, Victoria stood in the world she believed she owned. The marble steps behind her had been chosen by her design consultant. The brass planters near the entrance had been imported from Italy. The lobby flowers were replaced every morning because she hated seeing petals bend. Even the doormen knew her preferences. Sparkling water without lemon, room temperature, served before she asked. To Victoria, the hotel was not just property. It was proof. Proof that her taste mattered. Proof that her instincts were superior. Proof that people who belonged could recognize one another. Marcus Bennett had disturbed that proof by standing beside a car she thought should have announced someone like her. He had not pleaded. He had not performed gratitude. He had not acted ashamed under her accusation. That offended her more deeply than any argument. Ethan finally spoke, low and careful. "Victoria, this is Marcus Bennett." Her jaw tightened. "I heard what Claire called him. That does not explain why he was standing outside dressed like." She stopped herself, but the missing words were louder than the spoken ones. Officer Collins raised her eyes. "Dressed like what, ma'am?" Victoria looked toward the cameras, the phones, the silent valet, and the police officers waiting for an answer. For the first time, language failed her because honesty would have condemned her more quickly than any evidence. Marcus picked up the key fob from the roof of the car. Water slid from the silver edge into his palm. He pressed the unlock button once. The Rolls-Royce responded with a soft flash of light, gentle and certain, as if the machine itself had grown tired of the accusation. No alarm, no resistance, no mystery, just recognition. A quiet sound moved through the crowd. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. Claire opened the folder and handed Officer Hayes the registration. He read the page, then looked at Marcus with a different kind of attention. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "the documents appear to confirm the vehicle is registered to you." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, officer." Victoria gave a brittle laugh. "There must be some misunderstanding." "Of course there is," Marcus said. His voice remained calm, but now the calm had weight. "The misunderstanding is that you believed ownership had a look, and I did not match it." The words settled under the canopy like thunder that had chosen not to shout. Victoria's lips parted, but no defense came. Behind her, the revolving doors turned again, releasing more executives into the rain-bright night, each one slowing as they recognized Marcus. Then Ethan, then the police, and finally Victoria standing between them like a portrait beginning to burn from the inside. Marcus did not move toward the car, even though he could have. The registration was in his name, the key had answered to his hand, and the first layer of the lie had already begun to peel away in front of everyone. But something in the front drive still felt unfinished. The crowd had gone quiet in that careful way people become quiet when they realize they may have stood too close to injustice and done nothing. Officer Hayes lowered the papers. Officer Collins looked at Marcus as if waiting for him to decide whether the night would end as an embarrassment or become something larger. Ethan Langford seemed to understand before anyone else did. His mouth tightened. "Mr. Bennett," he said softly, "perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, away from the cameras." Victoria seized the offer like a handrail. "Yes, exactly. This is getting ridiculous. There is no need to turn a misunderstanding into a spectacle." Marcus looked at her. The rain had gathered along his collar, but his posture remained straight, almost impossibly composed. "A misunderstanding usually starts with confusion," he said. "This started with certainty." Victoria blinked. Ethan shifted his weight. The hotel manager, a narrow man named Paul Reeves, stepped forward with a nervous smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Bennett, on behalf of the Langford Grand, please accept our deepest apologies for the inconvenience. We can arrange a private lounge, warm coffee, anything you need while we correct this." Marcus turned to him slowly. Paul felt the full weight of that gaze and stopped smiling. "I do not need coffee," Marcus said. "I need the security footage from the valet entrance, the west camera facing the curb, and the lobby camera near the revolving doors." Paul swallowed. "Sir, we would need authorization to release internal footage." "You have it," Ethan said quickly. "Give him whatever he asks for." Victoria's head snapped toward her husband. "Ethan, not now." "Victoria," he said, but there was no strength in it, only fear wrapped in discipline. Marcus heard that fear. He had heard it many times from executives who suddenly remembered that power had paperwork, and paperwork could change hands by morning. but he did not enjoy it. That was the part people often failed to understand. Real power, the kind earned through patience and discipline, did not need to smile when others trembled. Marcus had not built his life to frighten people. He had built it so that people like Evelyn could walk into a hospital, a bank, a hotel, or a dealership and be treated as human before being measured as anything else. He glanced toward the valet stand, where a young attendant in a burgundy jacket stood with both hands clasped in front of him. The boy looked no older than 20. His name tag read Jordan. Marcus remembered him from earlier. Jordan had been the one who parked the Rolls-Royce and had quietly said, "Beautiful car, sir," with no surprise in his voice, no suspicion, just simple admiration. Now Jordan stared at the ground as if trying to disappear. Marcus nodded toward him. "Ask your valet what happened." Jordan looked up, startled. Paul Reeves turned, irritated. "Jordan, did you see this gentleman arrive with the vehicle?" Jordan's throat moved. "Yes, sir." "Speak clearly," Marcus said, not unkindly. Jordan lifted his chin. "Yes, sir. He arrived around 6:45. He handed me the key himself. I gave him claim ticket number 19. Victoria's face tightened. "Why did you not say that before?" Jordan's eyes flicked toward Paul. "No one asked me, ma'am." The sentence was small, but it traveled through the crowd with quiet force. Officer Collins wrote something in her notebook. Officer Hayes looked toward Paul, whose cheeks had turned the color of wet brick. Marcus reached into his coat pocket and removed the folded valet ticket. It was damp at the edges, but readable. Number 19. He held it out, and Officer Hayes accepted it. "That confirms the valet statement," Hayes said. Victoria inhaled sharply, still fighting to keep control of the story. He could have found that ticket. Marcus tilted his head, found the key, forged the registration, fooled the valet, and waited beside the vehicle for the police to arrive. "That is your explanation now?" A few people in the crowd looked down, embarrassed by the plainness of it. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan whispered her name again, this time almost pleading. But Marcus was not finished. He turned toward Officer Hayes. "I would also like your report to include the exact words used when the call was made." Officer Hayes nodded. "We can request the dispatch record." "Thank you." Then Marcus looked at Paul Reeves. "And I want every employee who was present to be interviewed, without supervision from hotel management." Paul stiffened. "Sir, that seems unnecessary." "It is necessary if your staff felt safer staying silent than telling the truth." Those words reached Jordan like warmth through a closed door. His shoulders eased slightly. Claire Whitman watched Marcus with an expression that had moved beyond apology into recognition. She had worked around wealthy men for years. Most demanded privacy when humiliated and attention when praised. Marcus was doing the opposite. He was keeping the wound visible so it could not be denied later. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice as if privacy could still be invented between them. "Mr. Bennett, I can admit I may have overreacted. This does not have to become some moral performance." Marcus studied her face. There it was. Not remorse. Strategy. He could almost see the gears moving behind her eyes, searching for the sentence that would save the smallest version of herself. He answered softly enough that people leaned in to hear. "Dignity is not a performance because someone powerful finds it inconvenient." The rain seemed louder after that. It tapped against the canopy, the car roof, the brass luggage carts, the phone still recording in trembling hands. Ethan looked at the hotel behind him, at the name Langford shining in gold above the revolving doors, and for the first time all night, the letters looked less like a legacy than evidence. Marcus placed the valet ticket back into Officer Hayes' hand and finally stepped away from the Rolls-Royce, not toward the driver's seat, toward the hotel entrance. "Where are you going?" Victoria asked, her voice thinner now. Marcus paused beside her, close enough for her to hear, but far enough to deny her any intimacy with his pain. "Upstairs," he said, "to finish the meeting your husband asked me to attend." Then he looked past her to Ethan. "Bring the footage. Bring the call record. And bring everyone who thought silence was safer than truth." The private elevator rose without music, carrying Marcus Bennett, Ethan Langford, Claire Whitman, Paul Reeves, and a silence so heavy that even the soft hum of the cables seemed careful. Victoria came last, not because anyone had invited her, but because she could not bear being left downstairs with the people who had watched her certainty collapse. The mirrored walls reflected them all in narrow pieces. Ethan's pale jaw, Claire's damp folder, Paul's nervous hands, Victoria's white coat marked by rain, and Marcus standing in the center without needing to fill the space. On the 38th floor, the doors opened to a corridor lined with dark wood, cream carpet, and framed photographs of ribbon cuttings, charity galas, and smiling executives beside oversized checks. The hotel had built an entire hallway to prove its virtue. Marcus walked past every picture without slowing. In the conference room, the long table was still set from the earlier meeting. Bottled water stood in perfect rows. Leather chairs faced a screen where numbers had been waiting to decide the future of hundreds of employees who had no idea their workplace had nearly been judged by spreadsheets alone. Now the room held something more honest than numbers. It held Jordan the valet, Officer Hayes, Officer Collins, the two security guards, Paul Reeves, Claire Whitman, Ethan, Victoria, and Marcus. No one sat until Marcus did. That small delay said more than any apology. Ethan cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, I want to begin by saying that what happened outside does not reflect the values of this company. Marcus looked at him. Which company? The question landed softly, but Ethan understood the blade inside it. His hotel company was only hours away from becoming a subsidiary of Bennett Holdings. His employees were still being trained by policies Marcus had not yet approved. His wife had just given those policies a face. Ethan lowered his eyes. This hotel, he said. Marcus nodded once. Then let the hotel speak. Paul Reeves connected a laptop to the screen with fingers that fumbled twice before the image appeared. The first camera showed the front drive at 6:45. The Rolls-Royce pulled in slowly, headlights washing over the wet curb. Marcus stepped out, handed the key to Jordan, accepted the claim ticket, and thanked him. No lingering. No suspicious movement. No theft. Just arrival. Jordan stood near the wall, swallowing hard as the room watched him do his job properly. The second clip showed Marcus returning later, walking alone from the lobby, claim ticket in hand. It showed him speaking briefly to the valet. It showed Jordan searching for the key. Then it showed Victoria at the top of the steps, pausing, turning her head, and staring before she had heard a word from anyone. Claire's breath caught quietly. Officer Collins wrote something down. The third clip had no sound, but it did not need sound. Victoria moved fast, pointed at Marcus, and summoned security with the confidence of a person who had already convicted him inside her own mind. Marcus sat very still. On the screen, his body looked smaller beneath the hotel lights, surrounded by people who had mistaken volume for truth. In the room, he felt the same old ache beneath his ribs, but he did not touch it. Pain did not need a witness to be real. The dispatch recording came next. Officer Hayes played it from his department phone on speaker. Victoria's voice filled the conference room, polished and urgent. There is a man outside trying to take a Rolls-Royce. He does not belong here. I need officers immediately. The words hung in the expensive air. He does not belong here. Victoria stared at the table as if the wood grain had become fascinating. Ethan closed his eyes. Paul Reeves shifted in his chair. One of the security guards whispered, I am sorry, sir, but Marcus did not look at him yet. He looked at Victoria. When you said I did not belong. Here, what did you mean? Her lips parted. I meant near the vehicle. He had the key. I did not know that. The valet knew. The cameras knew. The registration knew. Marcus leaned forward slightly. So I am asking what you knew before you decided none of that could be true. Victoria's face tightened, and for a brief second the room saw the fight in her, not against injustice, but against exposure. I made a mistake, she said. That should be enough. Marcus shook his head. A mistake is turning left when the sign said right. A mistake is forgetting a name. What happened tonight was a choice repeated several times, even when truth stood in front of you with paperwork, witnesses, and patience. Ethan spoke quickly, desperate to stop the bleeding. We will issue a formal apology. We will compensate you for the inconvenience. Marcus turned toward him. You still think this is about inconvenience? The room went silent again. Outside the window, the city lights spread for miles, each one a window, a car, a room, a life. Marcus thought of Evelyn waiting in the hospital, asking whether he had eaten. He thought of Jordan downstairs learning that silence could protect a paycheck but wound a stranger. He thought of every polished building that trained ordinary people to doubt their own eyes when someone powerful sounded sure. Then he stood. The chair moved back with a low scrape that made everyone straighten. I came here tonight to decide whether Bennett Holdings should keep the Langford leadership team in place after the acquisition. Ethan's face drained further. Marcus buttoned his jacket slowly. I have my answer. The words did not explode. They settled. That was worse. Ethan Langford looked as if the floor beneath the conference table had shifted by 1 invisible inch, just enough to remind him that everything he trusted was balanced on something he did not control. Victoria sat very still, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that the diamond on her finger pressed into her skin. Paul Reeves stared at the dark screen after the footage ended, as though the black glass might return a better version of the night if he waited long enough. Marcus remained standing, but he did not. Speak again right away. The silence widened. Outside the 38th floor windows, Atlanta glowed under rain, red brake lights crawling along Peachtree Street, office towers shining through the mist, water streaking down the glass in thin silver lines. From that height, every person below looked small, but Marcus knew better. No life was small from the inside. Down there, someone was clocking out late. Someone was riding a bus home with sore feet. Someone was counting the dollars left after groceries. Someone was standing in a lobby, trying to be polite to a guest who had decided politeness was weakness. He saw all of them more clearly than he saw the executives in front of him. For a moment, the room disappeared, and he was back in Savannah, standing in a grocery store aisle at 14, while Evelyn counted change into her palm. A man in a suit had sighed behind them, loud enough for everyone to hear, as if her careful counting was an insult to his schedule. Evelyn had not turned around. She had only placed the coins on the counter, smiled at the cashier, and said, "People show you who they are when they think you cannot answer back." Later, outside under a hard July sun, Marcus had asked why she did not defend herself. Evelyn had looked at him over the top of her glasses and said, "Baby, answering back is not always loud. Sometimes it is becoming the kind of person who makes the room remember what it did." Now, years later, in a room worth more than the grocery store, Marcus felt the full weight of that sentence. He could end careers with 3 signatures. He could cancel the acquisition before midnight. He could make Ethan Langford spend the next year explaining to investors why his family name had become a public relations fire. He could do all of it, and no one in the room would call it unfair. But Evelyn had never taught him to mistake punishment for justice. Justice had to repair something, or it was only anger wearing a clean suit. Marcus placed both hands on the back of the leather chair in front of him. "I am not making a final decision tonight," he said. Ethan lifted his head slightly, hope and fear crossing his face at the same time. Victoria looked up, too, but Marcus did not look at her first. He looked at Jordan, the young valet standing near the wall in his damp burgundy jacket. "Jordan," he said, "did anyone train you on what to do when a guest makes an accusation against another guest?" Jordan swallowed. "We are told to call security and let management handle it. Are you trained to speak up if you witness the truth?" Jordan hesitated. "Not really, sir." Paul Reeves closed his eyes. Marcus nodded. "That changes tomorrow." Then he turned to Officer Hayes and Officer Collins. "I appreciate your professionalism once the evidence was reviewed." Officer Collins gave a small nod, but Marcus continued. "But I want the report to reflect that the accusation was made before any verification and that I provided proof without resistance." Officer Hayes nodded. "It will." Marcus looked at Ethan. "This hotel does not need a prettier apology. It needs a different spine. Every employee, from valet to executive management, will receive bias response training from an outside civil rights firm. Not a 2-hour online module. Real training. Scenario-based. Mandatory. Paid." Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes." "Second," Marcus said, "Jordan and any employee who cooperates with the review will be protected from retaliation in writing." Jordan's eyes widened. "Third, Paul Reeves will step aside from guest operations pending an independent review." Paul's mouth opened, then closed. Ethan looked at him, then back at Marcus. "Done," he said quietly. "Fourth," Marcus said, "the hotel will establish a legal and travel assistance fund for guests or employees wrongfully accused on property. No press release until the work is real." Claire Whitman wrote every word down. Her pen moved fast, but her face had softened. She understood now that Marcus was not trying to humiliate the room. He was trying to make sure it could never hide behind confusion again. Finally, Marcus turned to Victoria. She seemed smaller without the crowd, without the steps, without the bright hotel entrance framing her certainty. For the first time all night, she looked less like a villain than a person trapped inside the life her pride had built. "I am sorry," she said, but the words came out thin, almost unfamiliar to her mouth. Marcus studied her for a long second. "I believe you are sorry this happened in public," he said. "I do not know yet if you are sorry it happened at all." Her eyes shone, but he did not soften the truth for her. "You called the police because you decided my dignity was less believable than your suspicion. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a mirror." The room went completely still. Marcus picked up his phone and saw 3 missed calls from the hospital. His expression changed for the first time, not with anger, but concern. "Evelyn." He stepped back from the chair. "This meeting is over for tonight." Ethan rose immediately. "Mr. Bennett, please, let me arrange a driver." Marcus shook his head. "My car is downstairs." Then he walked toward the door, leaving the wet city glowing behind him, and the room full of powerful people sitting quietly with the sound of what they could no longer deny. Marcus walked out of the conference room before anyone found the courage to follow him. The corridor outside felt colder than it had before, or maybe the cold had simply moved from the rain into the walls. His phone was already against his ear by the time he reached the elevator. A nurse answered on the second ring, her voice quiet and kind. "Mr. Bennett, she is stable." She woke up asking whether you were still coming. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second, and the breath he had been holding left him slowly. "Tell her I am on my way," he said. "Please tell her I kept the soup warm in the car." The nurse laughed softly. "She said you had better not bring that fancy hospital cafeteria soup again." For the first time all night, the corner of Marcus's mouth moved. "I know better than that. Homemade chicken noodle from Miller's Deli. Extra crackers." He ended the call as the elevator doors opened, and the reflection in the polished metal showed a man who suddenly looked less like a chairman and more like a son trying not to be late. Behind him, footsteps hurried down the hallway. Ethan caught up first, then Claire, then Victoria several yards behind, moving more slowly now, as if each step required her to cross something inside herself she had never crossed before. "Mr. Bennett," Ethan said, "please allow me 1 minute." Marcus stepped into the elevator and held the door with his hand. 1 minute. Ethan swallowed and looked toward Claire. She opened the folder she had carried from the boardroom, but this folder was not about the Rolls-Royce. The pages inside were stamped with the seal of Bennett Holdings and the digital certification mark from the closing attorney. Ethan's voice lowered. The board vote finalized at 8 o'clock. The controlling interest transferred 23 minutes ago. Claire confirmed it with counsel while you were on the phone. Marcus looked at the papers without surprise. He had expected the transaction to close before midnight, but not this soon. Claire turned a page. Bennett Holdings now holds 71% of Langford Hospitality Group, including all operating rights for this property, the regional management contracts, and the executive review authority. The elevator became very quiet. Victoria had reached them just in time to hear the final sentence. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Ethan did not look at her. He looked at Marcus, and in his face there was something beyond fear now. There was the exhausted recognition of a man realizing that the person he needed most had just seen the truth of his house from the front steps. Marcus took the folder, not to inspect it, but to close it gently. "Then this is no longer a negotiation," he said. "It is a responsibility." The elevator carried them down in silence. Floor numbers glowed above the door, 34, 29, 23, each number falling like a quiet countdown. Victoria stood in the corner, staring at the gold handrail. She had spent years moving through buildings where people rushed to open doors for her, and now she seemed unsure whether she had the right to stand beside the man she had tried to remove from his own car. At the lobby level, the doors opened to a different world from the one Marcus had left downstairs. The crowd had thinned, but not disappeared. Employees stood near the front desk pretending to work while watching everything. Jordan the valet waited near the entrance, twisting his cap in both hands. Officer Hayes and Officer Collins were speaking with the security guards, their voices low and professional. The Rolls-Royce still sat beneath the canopy, wet and black and patient. Its headlights reflected in the marble floor through the glass doors like 2 small moons. Marcus stepped into the lobby, and the room subtly adjusted around him. Not with applause, not with drama, with awareness. Paul Reeves had already returned downstairs, and he stood near the concierge desk looking like a man who had finally understood that status could not protect him from a record. When Marcus approached the front drive, Jordan straightened. "Sir," he said, "I should have spoken sooner." Marcus stopped in front of him. "You spoke when asked. Next time, speak when truth needs help." Jordan nodded quickly, his eyes bright. "Yes, sir." Victoria watched that exchange from a few feet away. Something about it unsettled her more than the paperwork had. Marcus had every reason to crush everyone connected to the evening, but he was giving instructions instead of insults. He was repairing what she had tried to reduce. She stepped forward, her voice quieter than anyone in the lobby had heard it. "Mr. Bennett." Marcus turned. Victoria looked at the floor first, then forced herself to meet his eyes. "I was wrong. Not inconvenienced. Not embarrassed. Wrong." The words seemed to cost her something. "I saw a man near a car, and I filled the rest with assumptions. I cannot undo that. I know I cannot." Marcus said nothing. Rain tapped softly against the glass behind him. Ethan stood motionless, waiting for a judgment he knew he could not soften. Victoria's voice trembled, but she did not look away. "I have spent my life calling prejudice standards because it sounded respectable. Tonight, I heard myself on that recording. I heard what I sounded like." Marcus studied her for a long moment. The lobby seemed to hold its breath around them. Then he said, "Hearing yourself is only the beginning. What you do after that is who you are." Victoria nodded once, and for the first time there was no argument in her face. Marcus turned toward the doors. Officer Hayes stepped aside. Jordan rushed forward, then stopped himself, waiting for permission. Marcus handed him the valet ticket. "Bring the car around properly this time," he said. Jordan looked confused, then realized Marcus was not mocking him. He was trusting him. "Yes, sir," he said, and moved into the rain with his shoulders a little higher than before. Ethan followed Marcus to the edge of the canopy. "Mr. Bennett, what happens to me?" Marcus looked at the wet driveway, then at the hotel sign shining above them. "Your title can wait until morning. Your character cannot." Ethan absorbed that in silence. Victoria stood behind him, no longer framed by power, but by consequence. When Jordan opened the driver's door, Marcus paused before getting in and looked back only once. "This company will not be run by people who confuse wealth with worth," he said. Then he lowered himself into the Rolls-Royce, and everyone outside finally understood that the man they had doubted was not entering someone else's world. He had been standing inside his own all along. The Rolls-Royce moved away from the Langford Grand without hurry, its tires whispering over the wet pavement as if the night had finally lowered its voice. Marcus did not look back through the rearview mirror. The hotel lights faded behind him, gold becoming amber, amber becoming a blur in the rain. He drove east with both hands on the wheel, past glass towers, closed coffee shops, and gas stations glowing against the dark. The soup from Miller's Deli sat buckled into the passenger seat in a brown paper bag, still warm enough to fog the plastic lid. By the time he reached St. and Medical Center, the rain had softened to a mist. The parking garage smelled of concrete, oil, and damp air. Marcus took the elevator to the 4th floor, where the lights were dimmed for the night and nurses walked with the quiet speed of people who knew rest was fragile. Evelyn was awake when he entered. She sat propped against 2 pillows, silver hair wrapped in a pale blue scarf, a television flickering silently across from her bed. Her eyes found him before he said a word. "You are late," she said. Marcus held up the bag. "But I came bearing peace offerings. Homemade chicken noodle. Extra. Crackers." Evelyn narrowed her eyes, then smiled. "That will save you for now." He pulled the chair close, set the soup on the rolling table, and helped her open the crackers the way she liked, folded in a napkin so the crumbs would not scatter. For several minutes, neither of them talked about the hotel. They talked about her nurse, the weather, the medicine that tasted like pennies, and the old man across the hall who sang gospel songs every time his daughter visited. But Evelyn knew him too well. She watched the careful way he poured water into a cup, the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the silence he placed between small tasks. Finally, she said, "Tell me what happened." Marcus sat back. "Someone thought I did not belong beside my own car." Evelyn did not gasp. She did not ask who. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, as if the world had disappointed her in a familiar language. "And what did you do?" she asked. "I made them look at it," Marcus said. "The cameras, the call, the silence, all of it." Evelyn opened her eyes. "Good. Then?" Marcus glanced toward the rain-streaked window. I wanted to destroy them. For a few seconds, I really did. Evelyn reached across the blanket and touched his hand. Wanting is human. Choosing is character. He looked down at her fingers, thinner now than they had been when she first held his hand outside the library all those years ago. I did not destroy them, he said. I made conditions. Training. Protections for employees. Independent review. A fund for people harmed by false accusations on the property. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once. That sounds like justice trying to grow legs. Marcus laughed softly despite himself. You always make everything sound like Sunday school, and a board meeting had a baby. She smiled, then grew serious. Do not let their cruelty rent space in your chest, Marcus. Make them pay in change, not just shame. He sat with that sentence long after she finished the soup and drifted to sleep, her breathing steady beneath the soft rhythm of the machines. Across town, Victoria Langford did not sleep at all. She sat alone in the hotel residence suite, still wearing the same white coat, now folded across her lap like evidence. Ethan had stayed downstairs with Claire and the legal team, reviewing footage, employee statements, and the acquisition documents that had turned the night into a verdict. The suite around Victoria was immaculate, all cream furniture and city views, but it no longer comforted her. Every polished surface gave her back a woman she did not want to recognize. At 2:17 in the morning, she opened her laptop. For once, she did not call a publicist. She did not draft a statement full of soft words and empty distance. She began with the sentence she had avoided all her life. I was wrong. She deleted it once, then typed it again. By sunrise, the letter was still imperfect, but it was honest. She sent one copy to Marcus, one to Ethan, and one to Claire, with a request that it be shared with every employee who had been present. At 8 o'clock, Jordan arrived for his shift expecting whispers, punishment, or both. Instead, Claire met him near the valet stand with a written protection notice, a paid day off if he wanted it, and a quiet thank you for telling the truth. Jordan read the paper twice, his thumb tracing the company letterhead as if it might disappear. Upstairs, Paul Reeves packed the framed certificates from his office under supervision. Officer Hayes filed his report with the dispatch, transcript attached. Officer Collins added her own notes about verification, assumptions, and the importance of witnesses who are too often ignored. At 9:30, Ethan stood before the staff in the lobby. His voice shook once, then steadied. What happened here last night was not an isolated embarrassment, he said. It was a failure of culture. We are going to change it where it lives, not where it looks good. Near the back of the room, Victoria stood without jewelry, without her white coat, without the armor that had once made her feel untouchable. No one applauded. That was right. Some moments are not meant to be applauded. They are meant to be carried. 2 weeks later, the Langford Grand looked almost the same from the street. The columns still glowed under warm lights. The brass planters still held white flowers, and the revolving doors still turned with a soft rush of air. But inside, small things had begun to change. The valet stand had a new policy card beneath the glass, printed in plain language instead of corporate fog. Every accusation required verification before confrontation. Every employee had the right to speak as a witness without fear of punishment. Security no longer moved because a wealthy voice sounded certain. They moved because facts required them to move. Marcus Bennett returned on a Tuesday afternoon without announcement. No camera crew, no board delegation, no press release. Just the black Rolls-Royce easing to the curb under a clear Atlanta sky, its paint catching the pale winter sun. Jordan saw the car first. For half a second, his face tightened with memory. Then he stepped forward with his shoulders straight and opened the door. Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett, he said. Welcome back. Marcus stepped out, wearing a dark suit this time, simple and sharp, with Evelyn's old silver ring on his right hand. He looked at Jordan's name tag, then at the new supervisor pin beside it. Congratulations, he said. Jordan tried not to smile too widely. Thank you, sir. Marcus handed him the key. Same as last time, Jordan said gently, but the words carried a different meaning now. Same car, same curb, same man, different room. Marcus walked through the entrance, and no one rushed in panic. No one stared as if he needed to explain himself. The doorman greeted him. The front desk clerk smiled with recognition. Near the lobby lounge, a housekeeper paused with a stack of towels and gave him a small nod, not the forced nod of service, but the quiet acknowledgement of someone who had heard what happened and understood what followed. On the far side of the lobby, Ethan Langford stood with Claire Whitman beside a group of department managers. He looked older than he had that night, but less polished in a way that made him seem more human. He approached Marcus without the old executive shine in his voice. "Mr. Bennett, the first training cycle is complete. The second begins Monday. Employee interviews are ongoing, and the assistance fund is active. First case approved yesterday. A night clerk in Buckhead, wrongfully accused by a guest over a missing watch." Marcus nodded. Did the guest find the watch? Ethan's mouth tightened. In his own luggage. Marcus said nothing, and Ethan understood the silence. Across the lobby, Victoria Langford stood near the windows. She was not wearing diamonds. Her coat was gray, her hair pulled back simply, her hands folded in front of her. She did not move toward Marcus immediately. That was another change. The old Victoria would have crossed the room as if space itself had been waiting for her. This Victoria waited until Ethan finished speaking, until Claire stepped aside, until Marcus looked in her direction by choice. Then she approached. "Mr. Bennett," she said. Her voice was steady, but low. "I wanted you to know I have started attending the employee sessions. Not as a speaker, as a participant." Marcus studied her face. There was no performance in it now, or if there was, it had been worn down by sleepless nights and honest rooms. "I heard Jordan speak last week," she continued. "He said silence can feel safer than truth when power is standing too close." She swallowed. "I think about that every day." Marcus looked toward the front doors, where Jordan was helping an elderly guest from a taxi, one hand steadying the car door, the other holding an umbrella angled perfectly against the sun. Then Marcus looked back at Victoria. "Keep thinking until it becomes action," he said. She nodded. "I will." No one hugged. No one cried loudly. No grand forgiveness arrived with music and open arms. Some wounds do not close because someone says sorry. They close when the world around them stops repeating the injury. Marcus understood that. So did Victoria now, at least enough to begin. Before leaving, Marcus walked alone to the center of the lobby. Above him, the chandeliers scattered light across the marble floor. He remembered standing outside in the rain, hands visible, dignity held together by breath and discipline. He remembered the weight of eyes that had chosen suspicion before truth. Then he looked at the people working beneath that same light, people whose names were now being heard in meetings where they once had been. Called positions: valet, housekeeper, clerk, guard, manager, human. His phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn appeared on the screen. "Do not forget dinner. And do not let them overcook the fish." Marcus smiled, small and private. Outside, Jordan brought the Rolls-Royce forward. This time, no one questioned who it belonged to. The car waited at the curb, black paint shining beneath the clean afternoon sun. Marcus stepped through the revolving doors, paused beside Jordan, and took the key from his hand with a quiet thank you. Behind him, the hotel continued breathing, softer than before. Victoria watched from inside, not frozen by fear now, but held still by understanding. Ethan stood beside her without speaking. Claire returned to her papers. The front desk phone rang. A bell cart rolled across the marble. Life moved on, but not unchanged. Marcus opened the driver's door and looked once at the building reflected in the window. Gold letters. White stone. Human shadows passing behind glass. Then he got in, closed the door, and drove away without hurry. The engine made almost no sound. The curb stayed empty for a moment after he left, washed in sunlight, holding nothing but the quiet shape of a lesson finally learned.